Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is part 4 of the Ted Bundy series. So if you haven't watched parts 1 through 3, this is the time to push that pause button. They're all up here on my YouTube channel. Here's the copyright disclaimer and a trigger warning. These true crime videos are not made for children, and it does contain sensitive subject matter, so viewer discretion is advised. And one final caveat, this true crime series is on the serial killer Ted Bundy, who's killed over 30 people, some claim up to 100. So the victim list is not exclusive. There are other victims. I have probably missed a few here and there. I grew up with Ted Bundy. I'm from the state that he was executed. Basically, I lived it. I lived the Chi Omega. I lived the Kim Leach. I lived the fear. I have a whole entire library of Ted Bundy books, and at the end I'll throw up some of my sources. I've gone through the FBI FOIA documents. I've gone through the FOIA documents from all the states. I've looked through psychiatric notes. You know, I'm not just pulling this out of thin air, as you will see. And so if I've missed something, just let me know in the comments section. Let's have a discourse. I'm not getting paid for this, okay? So be kind. So let's get into it. So this is part 4, Theodore Robert Bundy, the campus creeper. Ted changes his MO from the basement crawler to a campus creeper. Lucy Morgan reported in the St. Petersburg Times, quote, "I don't think that there will be another Bundy. He incited a lot of emotion and destroyed the innocence that surrounded the college campus. Before him, college campuses didn't invite that type of crime." I gotta admit, that's true. March 12th, 1974, we have Donna Gail Manson, age 19, from the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington. Evergreen State College, as the name suggests, was a very heavily wooded school. And Donna was a tiny little lady at 5 foot, 100 pounds, with long brown hair and blue eyes. Yes, her hair was parted in the middle, but I do want to note that that was the style at the time. She was independent. She was a free spirit. She liked photography. And she lived on campus in Dorm C, room 206. And she told her roommate that she wanted to go first to a folk dancing class and then to go to a jazz concert. It was called 25 Years of Jazz, and that was supposed to happen at 8 p.m. on the main floor library lobby. While she was a loner, people found her to be a very likable person, and she had been in good spirits and wanted to do her spring project on alchemy. I believe that they developed some of her photographs, and that's why the FBI file has her photographs in it. And I believe this was one of the campus mimes, one of her friends. She was wearing green slacks, a red, orange, and green striped top, a long, fuzzy black maxi coat. Before she left, she'd made some soup. She'd left it on the stove as if she was planning to have some later, and she hadn't taken anything with her when she left out around 7 for the few minutes walk to the activities building. I recommend to check out the website called This Interests Me, and as you can see here, you can see her dorm, you can see where the library and the activities building will be located, and you're also going to see where she was spotted on CNN Overhaul's place. She was last seen by a security officer named Sturgis, and she was walking along C&N Road walking south. And this is a road with no streetlights. This is straight from the case file. Sturgis, when he's talking about seeing her on March 12th, he says, "The first time I was driving north on what we call the C&N Road at approximately 8 to 8:30, and I observed her walking southward. I went over and checked some buildings in the residential area, and about 30 minutes later I observed her walking northward. I went on into the security office, and about 30 minutes later, after I'd seen her, I again went north on C&N Road and again observed her walking southward." And he didn't see her after that. He was pretty sure it was her. How would you describe her? Real small, short, real slender girl, real long dark hair. Couldn't be sure of her features, wearing a long dark coat. He just saw her walking back and forth. Donna didn't say she was going anywhere other than to the jazz concert, and she didn't take anything with her. And days pass, and her roommate, Deanna, contacts the sheriff's department almost a week later after Donna failed to return. Basically, her roommate didn't want to get her in trouble, so she waited 6 days to call anyone. And these are the field reports. If you ever want to pause, I've made them big enough for you to read them. Donna's parents, Lyle and Marie Manson, were notified. They arrived to her room. No notes or letters were found giving any kind of reason for her disappearance. Her suitcases were there. Everything was as it was. The bed was unmade. Her beloved camera was there, her sleeping bag, her flute. She would have taken her flute with her. And so they just didn't know what happened to her. She didn't have a steady boyfriend. She didn't have any serious problems. She had maybe $20 on her. And again, she was last seen wearing that red, orange, and green striped blouse, green slacks, and a distinctive black maxi coat. It was fuzzy. Her desperate parents asked for posters to be printed, and a $500 reward was raised right away. And in the following days, weeks, and months, 4 different search parties consisting of at least 200 people combed the 990-acre campus at Evergreen State College. They found no trace of her. And since it had rained heavily for those days that she wasn't reported missing, the search dogs did not get a good track of her. So if you watched my other parts, you know I'm going to say, well, where was Ted? Well, let's look at what the FBI put together for us. On the 11th, the day before she went missing, he bought gas in Seattle. And on the 12th, he wrote a check in Seattle. And then they believed that he abducted Donna Manson from the Evergreen State College. The next day, he did go to school. He didn't go to law school on the day she went missing. Ted wasn't doing well in law school because he was too busy trolling for victims and obsessing about it. Also note that Ted's friend, Thomas Sampson, went to Evergreen State College during 73 and 74, and this friend lived on a lake near the campus, and Ted sometimes visited him, and they played racquetball on the campus during at least one occasion during the summer of 74. So the Evergreen State College wasn't a place that Ted was not familiar. And after Ted tries to kidnap Carol DeRanch, that's coming up. You're going to see in the case file that Marie Manson, that's her mother, was writing to the authorities and signing off. Another question occurred to me in the meantime. This concerns Ted Bundy. Yes, the mother's intuition was exactly on the money. She was wondering if Ted was ever subjected to a lie detector test in connection with any of the cases in the area. And she thought it would be crucial in determining whether he is possibly guilty of any of the crimes for which he is suspect. Now, this isn't in the 80s. This was after the DeRanch. So people were putting 2 and 2 together, and her mother's intuition was sadly correct. It's also in March 1984, around this time, that Ted got himself let into his girlfriend Liz's apartment by her landlord, and he cried to Liz. I think he put his head in her lap. He said he wasn't doing well in law school, that he was failing at school, he was just unable to concentrate. And no wonder, because now we know what he was doing in most cases. He wasn't going to classes, he was out stalking, and he was out murdering. So here's your trigger warning: sensitive material, confessions. And this is from the case file from different people to whom he confessed. One says Manson was listed as a missing person and a possible homicide victim. Just prior to the execution of Ted Bundy in Florida, he confessed to Robert D. Keppel of the Washington State Attorney General's office that he had abducted Manson from the campus in 1974, decapitated her, and left her remains on Taylor Mountain in King County, Washington. With the deathbed confession from Bundy, they were removing her from the missing persons file. And this is from the Thurston County Sheriff's Office files regarding Donna. Ted Bundy claimed he killed her and put her body, quote, buried at Taylor Mountain in King County. He took her head home and burned it. I spoke with King County Captain Bob Evans, who had that area searched twice since the Bundy confession. The first time was with people and hand equipment. 2 weeks later, they used officers that were present during the original body discoveries and a skilled backhoe operator, and did it all 1 inch at a time, and they fully did the terrain, taking it all down, found nothing new, nothing more we can do. Robert Keppel later told more details about what Ted said he did with her head, that he took it to Liz's house and incinerated it, or tried to incinerate it, in her fireplace. I don't know if that's true, because fireplaces are not crematoria. I bet Ted tried and failed, and that he did bury the rest of the bones on Taylor Mountain, same as Hawkins. Ted also told Keppel that he was drunk during the incident and called it, quote-unquote, nightmarish. In the summer of 1974, Ted was working as an intern at the State Department of Emergency Services in Olympia. His supervisor, Neil Miller, said he was easy to get along with, and around this time, Ted lost interest sexually in his girlfriend, Liz Klepfer. April 14th, 1974, Ted is trolling on the Ellensburg campus in front of the library, pretending that he needs help, with his arm in a sling or his finger in a metal brace. Seemingly, he doesn't get any takers that day. On the 17th, he returns. Someone sees him, or someone matching his description, with the arm in a sling, dropping books in front of the library at approximately 10, and he leads this girl to a railroad trestle about 300 yards away, but she just sensed something was off about him, and this railroad trestle is across from Black Hall. Now, the earlier attempt on the 14th didn't get reported at the time because no one went missing on that day. But April 17th, 1974, Susan Rancourt was that kind-hearted next person to come across him. So we're at the Central Washington University in Ellensburg. Here's Susan, blue-eyed, blonde hair, 5'2", 118 pounds. The family nickname for her was Miss Prudence Pureheart. She came to the university to study biology, and she even worked in an old folks' home in the afternoons. I mean, this is the kind of idealized woman that he would attack. And they were kind-hearted people that would help someone in need. So the night that she was abducted, Ted had tried his ruse with 2 different women. And Susan, she just had gone across the campus to apply to be the next year's dorm monitor. Apparently, she was painfully shy, and a campus investigator said she felt she was too shy. So she was making an all-out effort to get out and to talk to people and to make new friends. So that was the reason she wanted to be the dorm monitor, and maybe another reason she was open to helping someone in need. Photo credit here goes to oddstops.com. I recommend that site for different locations dealing with Ted Bundy incidents. So according to the testimony of the other girl he had tried to lure away, he had parked across from Black Hall. So we have a pretty good idea of where he'd parked his VW. And so Susan was seen at Munson Hall, and she left at 10 p.m., and then she went to drop off a load of clothes in the dorm laundry, and then she headed to Bartow Hall for a German language film, but she never made it there. And then after she disappeared, campus officers checked her room. All her possessions were there. Quote, there was her money, her ID, her checkbook, contacts, glasses, clothes, everything. She was wearing a yellow coat, a short-sleeve sweater, gray cords, and brown hush puppies. When her parents were notified and were told the situation, they knew she'd been abducted. Susan had an obsession with flossing her teeth after every meal, and when her mother found her dental floss in the medicine cabinet, she knew that Susan had not left overnight on purpose. No one knew what happened to her. They said it was like the earth just opened up and everyone was completely baffled. And so the searches began. The campus police requested an intensive search of a 64 square mile area around Ellensburg. They coordinated with different agencies, and they couldn't find her. In researching these cases, sometimes it's the little things that get you because you're steeled for the bad stuff. And when I was on newspapers.com, I even came across a personal ad that the Ellensburg police or the family had placed with the reward in the personals. It's just so sad. So let's play the game. Where was Ted according to the FBI? Note with all these victims, for the ones that are pretty much confirmed, he's never anywhere else, of course. Not within driving distance. He's always within driving distance. So where was Ted on April 17th? He's writing a check in Seattle, and then he's traveling. He's at the Standard Station buying gas, because he's got to fuel up the VW to get to Ellensburg, and then the next day he's back depositing a paycheck in Seattle, Washington. He was in the area. And then on the 19th, you see, he writes a check for flowers. Also commonly, almost all the time in this, you'll see that he also calls whoever his girlfriend is at the time afterwards. On this one, I don't see a phone call, but usually you do see a phone call to Liz. It's believed that Ted parked in that parking lot across from Black Hall, that he lured Susan Rancourt to his VW, that he hit her with the crowbar when she bent over to put stuff in his vehicle. So while she's kindly placing his books or whatever or suitcase or whatever in his VW, he hits her with the crowbar. He absconds with her from the campus, and they later find the clothes that she had been washing in the dorm's laundry. So she never made it back there. And he took her to his favored spot. Remember in Silence of the Lambs where they talk about you covet things you see, you start close to home. I think a lot of these victims, I think Ted said it himself, the perp knows the victim doesn't necessarily know the perp. And I think that he knew Susan Rancourt, at least in passing, because according to couple, Ted's friend Terry Storwick lived in Ellensburg and was a friend of Susan Rancourt. Allegedly, Susan and Terry had an early morning jogging class together. Now, we don't know if Ted stalked her through knowing Terry or if this is just another wild coincidence of someone that either had a class with Ted or was one person removed from Ted, but there you go. There is a tie-in. So it's April 1974, and Ted leaves the University of Puget Sound Law School. It wasn't accredited at that time, and allegedly that issue became a problem for Ted. Yet the school had been close to home, so he decides that that's the problem. It's the school. And so he reapplies to the University of Utah Law School. So this is actually the third time he's applied to the University of Utah. He's already been taking these night classes at UPS that he sometimes attends and sometimes doesn't because he's too busy out stalking and killing. And he withdraws from UPS, but he doesn't tell Utah that he's already been in law school for almost a year. So he's already been a 1L, essentially. But he doesn't tell them that. And he gets accepted at the University of Utah, but he isn't going to leave for a while. So he keeps on killing. Ted wanted another campus girl, and he had already snatched 2. So he needed to travel further out of his comfort zone for his next victim. May 6, 1974, we have Roberta Kathleen Parks. She went by Kathy, by the way. She was abducted from the campus at Oregon State University in Corvallis. There are differing reports whether she was majoring in religion or if she was majoring in education or maybe even both. I don't know. Kathy was 5'7", 125 pounds with waist-length brown hair and light-colored eyes. And sadly, her father had just had a heart attack, so she'd had a stressful day. Kathy was last seen walking to the student union for an ice cream sundae, and she was another girl who only had her purse and some money with her. She didn't take anything with her because she wasn't intending on going anywhere except for an ice cream sundae. The investigators were later able to piece together that, she wasn't in the best of moods because she had recently declined an offer of marriage because she wanted to make it on her own. She wasn't super happy at the school, and she maybe, I think, had an argument with her dad, and then later on he'd had a heart attack. She found out that day he'd had a heart attack. So, and he recovered from the heart attack, but she didn't know that. So she was feeling low, and she'd rebuffed efforts of people to talk about the problems she was having that day. But she wasn't so low that she wouldn't help some stranger in need, right? So like the other girls, it's like the earth opened up and they just disappeared. She goes missing. The search starts, and the rewards start being offered, starting at $500. The assumptions that maybe she went to California, they're ruled out. Then as time goes by, the rewards are increased up to $1,500, and the searches that start on campus spread out. Volunteer searches are made along riverbanks, in the forest areas, everywhere, looking for her. And again, it's the little things. When I was looking on newspapers.com, I found this, that her dad had wrote, after all the searches, to the editor of the paper, of the Corvallis Gazette-Times. And if you want to read it here, I got so choked up reading this. This is a classy family. Thanking the sheriff, thanking the deputy sheriff, thanking everybody involved, all the individuals who gave their time to search for their daughter. And, talking about, regardless of the eventual outcome, that they're very much aware and appreciative of the continuing investigative efforts of the law enforcement agencies. And just talking about how thankful they are to everybody. And it just like to break my heart. So, where was Ted? Well, the FBI shows that on the 6th, he bought gas twice at a Standard station in Seattle. He wrote a check to Safeway, and he wrote another check, and they believe he drove to Corvallis. That's why he bought gas twice. And then by the 9th, he's back in Seattle. Many years later, when Ted Bundy is in prison and he's talking in the third person about these crimes, and even in his speculations, he's not being completely honest, but he speculates that Kathy was depressed and possibly was in the school cafeteria. That could be pretty accurate. He talks about maybe they went to a tavern in Corvallis, and maybe he told her he needed to pick up a finished copy of his thesis, and that maybe they stopped remotely in a remote area, and maybe if she was conscious, maybe so, that he preferred the victims to undress themselves, and that he said she was alive in Washington, and that there was some indecision about murdering her. Ted would later go on to imply that Kathy died on Taylor Mountain, and that he left her there, and that the animals were his quote-unquote garbage disposal. And though we haven't yet gotten into the finds, her skull and her jawbone were later found on Taylor Mountain, but we'll get to that in the timeline. Since Ted had abducted 3 different girls from 3 different campuses, and then he tries to pick up another one and fails, it's my opinion that he went to drink at the Flame Tavern, and that's where he picks up his next victim. This is the tip sheet from Judy McLinn calling in to say that Ted tried to pick her up. I think she just referenced, or whoever wrote this down, referenced the Flame Tavern to tie it into the Brenda Ball, because it happened at that same night, a couple hours before Brenda Ball. But I do not believe he tried to pick her up at the Flame Tavern. I think the website This Interests Me has it right on the money when they say, regarding Phyllis, former UW student stated that a man in crutches used her to carry a gas can to his VW Bug on May 31st, 1974. Once they get to the car, he asks her to get inside to help him start it by pushing a button underneath the steering wheel. And that by that stage, she starts to feel creepy. Something's not right. She apologizes and leaves. Again, this happens a couple hours. So this happened at 11, and it's on a campus, and he fails, and she gets creeped out and leaves. So maybe he goes to the Flame Tavern to drink, and this is where he encounters his next victim. So it's June 1st, 1974, And here's Brenda Ball, age 22, who went missing from the Flame Tavern in Burien, Seattle. Brenda was not reported missing right away because she was known to be gone from home for several days at a time, but she was last seen before or around closing time at 2 a.m. at the Flame Tavern, and she'd had a few beers. Brenda had asked a friend for a ride, but he was heading in a different direction, and some have said that she was seen leaving with a man. We don't know if that's accurate. Ted, in third-person speculation mode, said that he varied his MO and took her alive to his place under the guise of having a party at his place. And he speculated that he got her really drunk and that they had a voluntary sexual encounter and that she passed out and then he strangled her. Trigger warning, if you haven't clicked off, do so now. He then implied that he wasn't in any kind of hurry to dispose of her afterwards. Quote, put her in the bed, leave her in the closet, no one's coming in, end quote. And when opportunity allowed, Ted would spend time with the bodies. He said that as the murders escalated, less alcohol was needed and less recovery time between victims was needed. Years later, her mother said about her disappearance that it's something that you never get over and that you think about every day. No matter how busy you are, there's never a time when she doesn't come into your mind. The partial remains of Brenda Ball will later turn up on Taylor Mountain, and we'll get to that when the time comes. And we play the game, where was Ted? Well, according to the FBI, the day before, in the evening, he was in Seattle, and then he bought gas in Olympia, Washington. And then they believe that on June 1st, 1974, he abducted Brenda Ball from the Seattle Tavern, or from outside the tavern, and then he was late to Liz Klepfer's daughter Molly's baptism. And this stuck in Liz's mind whenever she later suspects him of being the Seattle Ted, because one of the dates was so clear in her mind because it was Molly's baptism, and he showed up very late, and it embarrassed her because her parents were there and stuff. It was an important occasion, and he was late. He missed the baptism because he was out killing Carol Ball and taking her where he dropped her off. So this is a good stopping point for part 4. Stay tuned for part 5. Do the YouTube-y things. Hit the like button if you like this. Hit the notifications bell so when part 5 comes up, you just get a little notification. I do appreciate everybody's feedback, input, corrections, kind corrections. So stay safe, and without further ado, have an excellent day. Bye.